Welcome to the Simply Mindful Wellness Podcast. Join your host, Tracy, the Mindful Wellness Coach, as she takes a deeper look into nourishing your body, mind, and soul. Because being well creates the freedom to live life the way you want.
So, hello and welcome to another episode of the Simply Mindful Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Richardson, the Mindful Wellness Coach and Holistic Health Practitioner and owner of Hybrid Therapy. So, welcome, listeners. Today, I'm joined by the amazing Jordan Shane Terry from Adaptable Polarity, who's described as a human helper, a movement detective, a body listener, and a student and a teacher. Formerly an architect and now applying structure and flow to bodies and not buildings. So welcome. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm wonderful. I'm feeling nice and fresh as I got into the ocean and surfed this morning and ran into the office and set up, and feeling good.
It sounds blissful. So just explain to the listeners that you're based on the gorgeous west coast of the US.
I am California. I call home Santa Cruz, but I'm currently down in Carlsbad, which is northern San Diego County.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on today. So hopefully we're going to be discussing a lot about adaptable polarity and talking about body awareness, breathwork, cranials, and the hard palate. So if you'd just like to introduce yourself to the listeners and share with them a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Well, you did a great job. Thanks. I started out as an architect and in a very clear choice point. When there was a doctor of depth psychology, and she was talking about one time, her name was Jennifer, I can't remember her last name. She's talking about if we look back at our life that we can have our own string theory, and these strings will connect these choice points where at some point, if we had said yes, or if we had said no, or maybe done nothing, I don't know, with the third option, our life just takes another path. Right? I mean, you go into that multiverse in a different universe. And so for me, that was sitting in Santa Barbara Massage School, it's called Santa Barbara Body Therapy Institute. And the director of the school just turned and looked at me and was like, well, what about you? We were signing up my wife at the time. And that was it. I said yes. And that has spiraled down many rabbit holes and really led me to being my own boss and my own business. And so now really have brought everything underneath Adaptable Polarity. Previously had taught cranials in a form of it called integrated cranials, kind of pigeonholed myself, and then recreated myself. I adapted.
Awesome.
And so it's become what it is. People are, as we were discussing before this, are often like, well, can you describe? They want a very clear definition and format, like a flow model as to what it is. And it's different for every person. But we're dealing with human beings, and so it's going to be very similar at the same time. Because good body work, healing, movement, in the end really does the same thing, and that helps facilitate someone into their body, to coalesce with their body, potentially connect with others. We are more connected than others than ever before, as you and I can sit here and see each other's face, and I can see you smile, and you're on the other side of the world, and it's like instantaneous. Like, how amazing is that? And yet so many of us feel disconnected and truly highlighted in this last 2 years how stressful that separation can be and how important. And don't get me wrong, I love my alone time. It's part of surfing for me. I typically, there's a lineup down here. It's a big, giant beach break. And there's like one spot because of some reef that makes it a bit better. And everyone kind of congregates there. And I'm like, well, I also see a wave over there. I'm going over there. No, that weird fringe 10% kind of guy. And it has been pointed out to me by others throughout my lifetime. But bring that back to adaptable polarity. I believe that I will be the first not modality, which kills in the marketing, but that's not why I'm doing it. And then to welcome all other modalities. Bring what you know. Tell me what you know. Tell me how you like to work. And let's find how we can shift through that, how we can listen to the body. And is, as we were saying, the tools in your toolbox, is a hammer appropriate right now? Or maybe it's the chisel, or maybe it's the screwdriver, and ultimately that comes down to a form of listening. And that listening can be through our fingertips. And that was one of my hesitancies to bring adaptable polarity into a form of teaching online, was because it was so touch based. It was so body based. And I shifted. Shift happens. And it works. And we're having good times training people online through this, and still offering the course. So the course will be run this summer in Santa Cruz, and this fall it's looking like in Philadelphia.
Awesome.
There's a little bit about me and what's going on.
So what I really liked is your analogy that you used about the toolbox, and how, like, as a therapist, everybody's like, oh no, you've got to use this one thing, you've got to use this one thing. But actually, as you said, humans, we have similarities, but there's lots and lots of differences, and what suits one person won't necessarily suit another. So having that toolbox with the chisel, the hammer, the wrench, the screwdriver, whatever it is, you've got something for every kind of situation that comes in. And tell us a little bit about how like you make a space for everything, for all these different kind of modalities, these different therapies in your toolbox.
Sure. That concept, making space or holding space for all possibilities. So if I know what I know, tiny little amount, and I know what I don't know, which is a greater amount, and then I don't know what I don't know, right? In this universe, I'm constantly blown away when I find myself in a new little microcosm of the world, just be it down here in Southern California versus my home in Santa Cruz, or coming across an article about a business world, and it's like, I know nothing about that. There's an entire world with an entire life and force behind it, and I know nothing about it. And so if I use what I know as my little looking glass, and won't look at anything that doesn't have a research paper, and will just refuse on this or that, then I really close my world off and the possibilities. And so this concept of holding space kind of got popularized recently. And then as soon as something gets popular, someone will make fun of it. And JP Sears did a wonderful, hilarious pun, one of his satirical skits on holding the space. But the simple concept of it is being totally present and aware before the person in front of you, at least in terms of client and therapist. And so that holding of space is, if I may remain open, then answers can come to me that I never would have thought of. And this is a bit of a Buddhist practice of remembering that the answers are already out there, and that we need to only remember them. And so I think it's basically day one, I talk about this in the course, that so everything has poles, everything is polarity, and that's how we define it, and that's how we know it. And we think that they're opposites, but by them being opposites, they are one and the same. They're just the other side, day and night, and that weird zone between each where it's like, is it daytime yet? Is it nighttime yet? No, not yet. And then at some point we're like, now it's nighttime. And so that ability to remember, to open up, to not reach, because just as there's a law of attraction, then there must be a law of repulsion. And oftentimes in reaching, in striving to grasp something, we push it away from ourselves. And that's not to say to have ambition. There's this dance, right? The Tao, the yin yang symbol is a 2D fixed shot diagram of the universe, but really that thing is continually swirling, and every time the dark seems to consume the light, The seed of light grows within the dark, and vice versa. And it is always this balance, and it's always in motion.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I
And
like to think of that as it's like you're tuning in to what you need at that point in time, but you're not forcing it. So like you say, you're holding that space. You're not trying to push the issue or force the issue. You're waiting for it to come.
And a simple example from a client yesterday working on their neck, responding really well to just simple articulations and working the spine. And there's just this point where maybe I'd opened it up about 80%, but there was this 20% just holding on like, and I, could have just sat there and kept going, but I listened to that and just stopped for a minute and actually switched to a manual muscle test and found, it was the front, and simply worked the front for a minute and then came back to the back, and that 20% had just disappeared. And the client was like, where's my neck that I normally know? Because now I feel like Gumby. Awesome. And that's just a simple localized example of that. Sometimes it gets really wild with the stuff that comes up. And as you're saying, tuning in, that intuition, had I years and years ago, I always said I'm not intuitive. And the first time I saw cranial sacral therapy, this is a joke. I don't understand it. It was not portrayed to me well. It was too ethereal for me. And the little subtle things. And even when I finally bought in and finally signed up for a cranial course, the words that I say to all students is, you can't tell me that you don't feel anything. Well, I remember that. But I can feel stuff. And I did notice stuff. I just wasn't trained.
Yeah.
And we can all do that. We all have it there. We all have that one thing in our lives where we're like, oh, I knew it. I knew it in my gut. I knew it in my entire being. And I still went and did it when I shouldn't have.
Yes.
Right? The whole body, it's like, ooh, do you want that piece of cake? And your whole body's like, mm-mm-mm-mm. And then you just watch your hand like reach down because your the salivary glands are kicking, and you're just like, yeah, I want a cake. And then afterwards, like, oh, I feel terrible. What was in that cake?
We've all been there for sure. So you work with obviously the cranials, like you've said, and that's a little bit about listening with the fingers, but you also do lots of other stuff as well. So that would be more like your axial skeleton. So for the listeners who are not aware, it's like the cranium, the skull, the spinal column. But you also work with like the viscera, so the organs, and also like the peripherals as well. So how does whole body, yes. So how does all this interlink then, like with the polarities and being in tune?
Well, all of its polarity, especially our functional anatomy. Everything exists in pairs. And so for, functional anatomy, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, concussions, when, a strike to the head here, and it might be a small little area to deal with here, but the other side of the head, there's a lot, the brain went and hit the other side of the head and reverberated back. So looking at both sides, understanding both sides. The neck example I gave, back pain often is an abdominal issue, or it's both, a balance of both. And so, the reason to start on the axial skeleton is to really get people into their own bodies and their clients' bodies. So the axial skeleton is going to have the most neurological charge, and it's what likes softer. I don't think more than a majority of the time that the spine likes the high force velocity adjustments. I really think there's a tiny percentage where the joint has been stuck for so long that it's fibrous that it needs that. The rest of the time, I think it wants to be held, it wants to be listened to, it wants to be heard. And oftentimes one of the best ways to do that is through breath and breathing and listening to the subtler things. And so we start axial as that's the hub, Everything's coming and going to your brain from your spine. And the reason we include the spine is because of the dura mater that wraps your entire brain and all the way down to your sacrum. And then at the 3 different major diaphragms, so intake, where we take stuff in, that'll be here, the processing, the classic diaphragm, and then the excretion diaphragm. And that's also how I view the breathing mechanism, is your entire cranium, your rib cage, and then, if you look up the respiratory system, it normally cuts off at the rib cage and doesn't even show anything else. I find that exists all the way down to the pelvic floor. That's if we wanted to define core and look at core, that would be the core. And then there's only so much that you can download in a weekend. That's how the courses were designed.
Oh, for sure.
So, the viscerocranium, the 14 bones of the face, the cheek, the jaw, and that tube and tract, and the visceral organs, that's the second. And we get a bit more into emotions and how we can hold space for that and at least have a tool to manage that. The first time I was doing some work, a very, very youthful massage therapist and client was like, I have some back pain. And I'm like, oh, I know a protocol, and trigger pointing his back pain. And he just starts breaking down on my table. And I distinctly remember freezing, going, I am not trained for this. I do not know what to do in this moment.
I think most
and yeah, I'm not alone.
No, definitely.
And so just in terms of being in tune, is if we can train on the highest charged zones, so the cranium, if a thought pattern is, synonymous to a tiny thunderstorm in your head, we can start feeling the subtle things there, but we can take that to the entire body. So that's why it ends up being extremities kind of as the last final course, and starting here on the core, and that charge and the ability to listen to the body, to the tissue, to ourselves, to the connection between the two. Oftentimes therapy is viewed as therapist does things to you and you walk out somehow new and better. Right. Yeah. It's absolutely a merger of the two. As soon as we become proximal, our electromagnetic fields interact, and we can say, what research paper do you have for that? But we all know it. We all know that friend or lover or family member that walks in the room in a stinking, heaping pile of mess, and we go, what's wrong? And they go, nothing. You're like, huh?
Okay.
We all know that as humans. And if we can hone that as therapists, if we can hone that as humans, let's get out of the therapy realm. If we can hone that as humans, well, then we can produce greater humans, and we can hold space for each other and evolve, adapt.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think what you were saying about like the energy fields and so on, certainly I know as a therapist, I feel things with my hands that you can't necessarily explain. And, you look into the quantum field and we can look at like particles and wave and spin and how all of that stuff interacts, and it is there, but actually, is it there?
Mm-hmm.
We can feel it. And like you were saying, the person comes into the room, I call them radiators and drains. So you can be around people that radiate all this energy and light, and it's just like, oh, I feel so good when I'm around this person. Or the drains that suck the life out of any situation, and you start to feel yourself, coming down in those situations. So as therapists, like, we protect ourselves in like a session or from that kind of energy, so that we can preserve ourselves for treatments. But I think that's also something we can facilitate in other people by, like you saying, providing them the tools. So like through the breath work, that's something that we do every single day. But it's just about tweaks here and there, or maybe facilitating something in that person that then they can go off and continue to do that. So when you're doing adaptable polarity, it's all about, you're saying about charge and the positive, the negative, and so on. So talk a little bit about breath work and how that's affected by the charge or the poles.
Well, that's the ultimate polarity. That begins our life with our first breath, and it finishes it too. And it is at the same time as the defining of our physical experience, it also is the thing that we can go without the least. I can go a couple days here without water. I don't try to. I can go about a week without food, and I'm maybe 2 minutes without breath.
For sure. So it's super important, and I don't think the general population realise just how important that breath work is, and the huge influence and impact that we can have when these people come to our clinics.
I appreciate that it has grown, at least in my consciousness, and that's because of marketing and social media, and people have done successful, amazing things. Wim Hof comes to mind, that he just is putting it out there. There's tons of research on it. There's, tomes and back in ancient texts, and it's been recognized importance, and it is one of the most ultimate human body technologies that is, as you were inferring, not used, not recognized. I don't have to think about it. Great. Thank you, autonomic nervous system. Imagine if we had to think about breathing.
Oh my God.
We couldn't sleep, huh? We wouldn't be able to do it.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Sure.
People literally tell me I forget to breathe. I'm
like sleep apnea and stuff like that. I have clients that have sleep apnea, and the modern allopathic kind of medical communities don't really know what they're doing with it. Whereas by looking at the nervous system or the emotions or the limbic system, or, just tweaking the breath work, can have such a profound difference, but they've never been told.
Never taught. We weren't taught to walk. We weren't taught to breathe. Just go out there, get a job.
Yeah, get a job, 9 to 5, retire.
But as you were asking also about the charge, there's the two sides of breath. We can use our breath to charge us up. You'll see this in athletic performances, people before they are about to race, whether that's swimming or sprinting. Really, inhale, really just, get pumped up. And you see it in martial arts as well. They're like very calm, but before there's some sort of conflict, whether it's competition or my kung fu movies that I enjoy from time to time, they ramp up their chi, however you want to say it. So there's the ability to do that. Unfortunately, the fight or flight mechanism that has been so functional for us is off the charts in a world where we don't have saber-toothed tigers chasing after us that often. And so we find other things to be afraid of, and then exist in about 10% of our lung capacity up here. And that becomes, neck muscles and chest muscles and constriction and so many things that then go down from there. So the other pole of it is learning to use our exhale to really control that, to slow it down. In the exhale, our heart rate slows, blood goes to the tissues, right in the heart rate variability. Right, just on an inhale, the heart will beat faster, and exhale, the heart will beat slower, even if we're just doing a steady inhale, exhale. And so utilizing that knowledge is a technology.
Absolutely. And something that I really liked from your website was that you're bringing the science to the magic, because it is magic. It's the human body is magic in its own entity.
Totally.
Science is just kind of catching up, and everybody's like, we've got to follow the science. We need the science. We need the research papers, but we don't. We just need to listen, like you were saying.
Well, yeah, I 100% agree. And our scientists have turned into salesmen for grants. I know. And I'll say stuff from time to time in the explorations of things, and people are like, "What, are you a scientist?" And well, yeah. I mean, also on my degree it says Bachelor of Science in Architecture, so
Absolutely.
I'm at least a bachelor of a scientist.
But then you don't need to look outside and be a meteorologist to know that it's raining.
Exactly.
So
And ultimately it's a way of thinking versus a diploma and I spend hours in a lab and have been published. We all, not everyone wants to necessarily think, and I'll give them that, but we all could be scientists. Should be. That should.
well,
We should be. We should have
scientists of our own bodies, really
100%.
our responsibility is no one else's responsibility. It would put people like me and you out of work potentially, but if everybody was responsible for themselves, or if more in tune with what was going on, then they would be breathing properly, they would be walking properly, they wouldn't have these little niggles and aches and pains potentially that they carry around on a daily basis, and just weighs them down.
Or at least curious about all those things.
Yeah, for sure.
So sorry. Could we pause for about 10 seconds?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Be right back. That's it. You're welcome. It's not a live stream, right?
No, I'll edit this, don't worry. It's cool.
Somebody left their necklace yesterday and they just turned up for it.
Oh no, it's cool. See, this is just life, isn't it? And this is why I wanted to do the podcast as like a chat, because life happens when you make plans.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with the adaptable polarity then, so it's not necessarily a process, it's like an intuitive thing, and it's bringing in lots of different kind of aspects to work with whatever's in front of you. So what's inspired you to work like this?
Failure.
Amazing. I love that. Inspiration from failure.
I had a time span where I was just writing checks and showing up at courses and not really sure why I was there, but I knew I needed to be there, and would have an amazing time and drink the Kool-Aid, and then show up that week and just be like, everybody needs this. And as this is part of the intro coursework as well, like hopefully by Tuesday I learned otherwise, but sometimes it took a little longer. And level of awareness, or a level of consciousness, ultimately being told that this is the way and not knowing any other way, I believed it until it was disproven, because I do think I'm a scientist.
No, but I think everybody is, and I can't remember who said this, but I have this phrase that sticks in my head: is when you know better, you do better. So yeah. Whether that's through learning, whether that's through reading, whether that's through practice, experience, when you know better, you do better. And I think as therapists, we never, ever, ever stop learning. I mean, certainly 10 years ago, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. No way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's similar for you. And this whole like adaptable polarity, the ethos behind it, it's like almost like a journey that's evolving in front of you, and you just going with the flow.
Absolutely. It's so much easier that way. And then I don't feel like I'm working. I don't feel like I have to figure anything out. Geez, that was Monday, the last session Monday. Because the client was very open to energetic work, just kind of sat and closed my eyes and didn't want to break the silence. They seemed like they were quiet. I was holding the spine, on a structural level. I think I was doing something, but what I was seeing was just like, whoa. And they kind of came out of it and had something to share. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so I saw this. You tell me if this makes any sense to you. And then they're like, oh my God, and this and that and this and that. And I'm just like, I need to make sense of it. I just needed to be there. I just needed to show up, maybe push, a button that allowed a little bit of lymphatic exchange and flow and blood flow displace over here. If we break down the physiology, and then something will lit in their brain, and meanwhile I'm seeing stuff in my head. And yeah, how do I explain that? And how do we research that?
So,
Can't.
No, I'm totally there on that planet, on that plane, on that wavelength. There's things that I see, feel, hear, see, I cannot explain, but when you're chatting about them with your clients, they're like, whoa, how did you know that? Oh my God, that's amazing. That's amazing. Like, yeah, it just makes so much sense. So I had a guy once that came in, foot pain, and had all the mechanical treatment in the world. But like 25 years previously, he'd had a crush injury to his foot that he hadn't really discussed that openly with anybody. We just like touched one spot, burst into tears, the pain had gone.
Yeah.
And it's just like, after all that time, 25 years of having all that pain, it's like, nobody's ever tried this. And I'm like, I've never tried it.
Nice. Good on you.
Well, that's it. You just don't know till you know, do you?
Absolutely. And well, I like to say to everyone that attends the course that, ask who's biomechanical minded or structural. And I'll admit, first and foremost, I'm a structuralist. I love when it's just a structural issue. Like, wow, that's easy. Great. Typically I can knock that out like 10, 15 minutes. It's like, all right, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your time now that your pain's gone? And the other side of it is for those that are, so if people raise their hands, say they're a structuralist, I'm like, great, there's an energetics course for you. And then conversely, I'll say that, people that are energetic minded, this is a structures course for you, because they're one and the same at some form and fashion. Posture is merely, said principle, specific adaptation to impose demand. So it's what I choose to eat and do with my body and my mind every day. And I often say it's not what you eat, but why you eat. And there's a Dr. Joe Dispenza portion in one of his books that he, better than I, in a beautiful neuroanatomy, geeky, human physiological way, explains that you can eat the highest chi, prana, organic food, but if you're doing that in a nervous, anxious, sympathetic fight or flight state, you're wasting your money on the food. You'll get something out of it. You'll get enough to survive, to get by, but to not sit and have a relationship with that which you're consuming, a gratitude, slow down, to be in a state of rest and digest, to begin the digestion process. That seems important.
For sure. And I think that's something that people don't get taught. And
No.
the whole nutrition side. So I have a background in personal training in a different life. And the whole nutrition side was the be all and end all. And actually, that's a very, very small part. Like you were saying, if you're not in that right nervous state, it makes very little difference what you're putting in, because the end result could very well be the same as if you're eating McDonald's.
Do they still exist? They're still out there?
I don't know.
Yeah. I see the commercials, but they're not in my field of consciousness when I'm driving around.
No, for sure. I mean, I don't have TV, so I don't even see the commercials, but I hear it's still there. So what have you found then, like with the adaptable polarity that you treat your clients with? What have you found has had the most profound impact, or you've seen the biggest impact on someone?
Breathing, self-empowerment, educating them. I'll go through a mild list. So mostly in adaptable play, what I'm teaching is people to listen to their own bodies and then to the bodies in front of them, both hands-on and hands-off, and using the axial skeleton as an excuse and using the structure of that to learn something and as an excuse. We also, there's one tool for managing if something emotional comes up, so that someone doesn't freeze like I did when someone starts crying on my table and just not know what to do. I remember being in the room and just wanting like help, like anyone out there. So a way to remain grounded and help them calm and hold that space and bring them back. So you're not sending them out or revving it up. And then ways to work and hold the spine, both through fulcrums and through breathing. And then the one major tool of it is a polarity balancing tool that is, looking for basically antagonistic spots. A simple theory on it is that when we have an unhappy nerve, that's typically going to be in an acidic environment. And so the body likes to be in balance and create homeostasis. And so this is why we often see in therapies that talk about pairings that it's almost always an antagonistic pair. And the brain, still theories as to what and why, will choose the antagonistic pair to pull from some of that alkalinity to create a balance between those two. So then we have a negative charge and a positive charge, so that they balance out. And so we have some acidic, localized area, alkaline. And that acid and alkaline environment of our blood is the pH level, right? Those terms go with pH, and that's our voltage, our ability to transmit the piezoelectricity. And so this tool, to me, I see you doing that. When I was shown this was given to me by Dr. David Lindemann. When I asked him if I could teach it, he was like, "It's not mine." I was like, "Oh, that's beautiful." And to me, I was saying to him, this is explaining hands-on touch and therapy and why it has done wonders for as long as we know. And it can be an intuitive thing, and in this, I'm helping people guide in. And I joke that this is your ticket to Hogwarts. You got your letter in the mail, and it's just an exploration. So there's a protocol that is taught, and I just hope that people make it their own, and that it's an understanding. And touch is wonderful, and how much of that touch is needed just if you understand that aspect of flow.
And I think Sorry,
I was just going to say and so in my sessions, there's always movement. I always start with movement. I always start with just seeing how it's an assessment and a treatment all in one. See how far that they can progress themselves without me touching them. I like that. And then there's some stuff that, we have a time frame, and money's on the line. It's unfortunate. Profit and healthcare should never be anywhere close to each other, but we operate in this world. And so at some point, I know I can help them progress further and quicker by some hands-on, so maybe tissue work. And so basically the only tissue work that I really do is pin and stretch. And then there can be some amazing neurological work. The best part about that sometimes is it doesn't even have my belief in it, and it does incredible things, wonderful, amazing things. And then honestly, the rest of these days has just been breathing and empowering people of like, how can you take care of you? If you don't want to take care of you and you want to come in, once or twice a week to pay my bills, let's just have a conversation about it, and then I'm okay with that. But if you really truly want to get better, then I don't want you in my office. I love you, but get out.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think as practitioners, when you have those people that want to be facilitated and want to really improve and are going to do the work on themselves, they're the most grateful for sure, but they're the ones that are in and out quickest often, because they're putting in the time in between sessions.
It's simple, and it's so obvious. And I'll tell people, I'll know if you did something different at home when I see you next week. I'll know. You will feel different. The body doesn't lie, right? The body is in the moment. It anchors us here. The mind off in the future, in the past, wherever it floats away to. but the body's here. And yeah, some of the most memorable clients, 2 to 2.5 treatments, and the last one is like, oh, what else do you want to work on? Because basically I gave them permission, was what they said was a big thing, to do something that they were afraid of. They did it safely, and they initiated that change into their life, their daily life and practice. And when they come back, I'm specifically right now thinking about a low back client, and just he had this whole feeling and sensation, and I would call it, like adhesion style stuff. And he said, really, I just started breathing into my pelvis all day long as I sat at work. He was he was a computer programmer. And the tissue difference in 2 weeks was phenomenal. It was noticeable, it was palpable, and his back pain was gone.
Wow. So I think
and I was like, well, I didn't do much.
Well, the thing is, you've facilitated that situation because he didn't know how to help himself. And that's what I think we do as clinicians. But when you were saying about the acidity in the tissue and the inflammation and all that sort of stuff, he's just cleared it, like just through breathing. And I don't think people really anticipate it can be that simple.
Yes. I honestly think we should be able to breathe and meditate ourselves out of any trauma. But, squirrel.
That's the shiny.
So I was teaching last night, and as to why we were holding the spine and listening to the spine, and it hit me, oh my gosh, when we don't encourage them or cue them, our clients, to breathe in a specific manner and just let them breathe, and we just listen. And there's an architecture of breath that I teach, and we know what it's supposed to do, but we don't impose what it's supposed to do upon that. We just listen. We get a read, we get a story from the spine, the entire spine, sacrum to cranium and sacrum as part of that breathing apparatus as well. And we can get the whole story of the human being and as to what's going on, because that's the autonomic nervous system telling us what's up, telling us, well, I flow here a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to flow down here. Or, like a lot of people with neck issues, super locked up here. They can breathe into their bellies, beautiful, but none of that translates through. And in the breathing apparatus, when something expands, if it's touched the whole spine, I mean, look at the way that the diaphragm grabs the lower back. And if we breathe into that whole apparatus and only parts of it move, then that's telling us what and where to look and listen. And then maybe we can cue it a little bit and create this call and response dance of therapy.
It is all about listening. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so
I wish I was better.
I feel calmer already. So, what kind of got you into working this way? So you come from architecture, so you've moved to like massage school and so on. But what kind of journey have you taken to get to this point where you're just listening and then tweaking?
Wow, good question. Well, yeah, so architecture school finished with an elective course called Careers in Architecture, and I went, ooh, that's not for me. I was in the service industry for a long time, serving tables or bartending or managing restaurants. It was University of Life for a little while. It was really fascinating and it was nice, and I had days off to go surf and work nights, and that worked well for a while. And then it switched to more of a job, and found another path. And so there was that choice point to be a massage therapist, and it was like, oh, this is neat. And it was a very, I would say, on the new agey side of massage schools. It was all about healing and qigong, and not to mock that, but like I said, I still will raise my hand saying I'm a structuralist. And yeah, trigger point was basically how I started my practice in orthopedic massage. I then went and took a neurokinetic therapy course and watched SI joint corrected, at least helped in all of 5 minutes, while I would have been happy if I got that done in an hour on a massage table. And so it just blew my mind in terms of lack of accuracy, and how quick and accurate and how quickly the body can change and what's needed for the body to change. And so that I really spent a lot of time studying and participating in neurokinetic therapy, and I still really love and appreciate that functional opposites, that movement, that displacement of fluid. Really what I got out of that was assessing where there's not enough and where it needs to be, and how can we displace the fluids through movement and release. And that's beautiful. That works. And then it doesn't work sometimes. Like, oh, okay. So what else is going on here? You know, colleague and another teacher, instructor's got the answer. Go down that rabbit hole and then down another rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, so everything works. This all has validity. There's a reason that this person's teaching this. It does work until it doesn't. And so that was personal exploration, definitely my own trauma, which I took on concrete to my jaw. I've never had jaw or TMJ dysfunction, but I have hip and knee pain occasionally. And typically I don't have to do anything to my hips or my knees. Well, this is my hips and this one bone was too. So if this is my femur and this is my knees.
Yeah.
And so personal journey there. And then, yeah, just I started exploring emotions and psyche, and ended up taking cellular release therapy, which is a kind of merge of some energy work and clinical hypnotherapy. And then at some point just had to stop and withdraw and forget. And I still have this drive to like go and learn, and like I should be taking courses. And I'm still in this phase of, no, you actually need to forget more. You actually just need to be stiller.
Nice.
And so a lot of my studies right now has shifted into illustrating the downloads I get from drawing the human body. I don't know if, I hope my excitement comes through, but I don't know if people get how
I sure
amazing it is. Oh, wonderful to hear. Oh, bless your heart.
I see on Facebook the drawings that you do. Number one, they're amazing, but when you're mapping like meridians and fascia and all this sort of stuff, and you can see the neurolymphatic points, and it's a journey, it's a process, whatever you want to call this stuff, like whatever kind of school of thought that you come from, it's all linked.
It's interesting that most recent series has had some of the least engagement on social media, but outside of that, the messages that I'm getting and just even comments like that, it's been the most profound at the same time. There's so many people that write to me and they're like, holy shit, your post today, I've been dealing with this thing and I just thought it was that, and then you posted this thing, and so then I looked at that and I had this aha, and now I feel so much better, thank you. I'm like, I really appreciate hearing that. So
for
that's
sure.
nice to share.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that is something that, a lot of people now with social media, they're not engaging, or they're reading or scrolling or whatever, but I don't think they're necessarily like passing it on, but certainly messages coming through in different kind of ways that are more personable.
Yeah.
Sure. So is there anything that you kind of have experienced along your journey to getting to this point that you didn't expect?
All of it.
So, okay, so the journey was you were going to massage school, you're going to be a massage therapist, and that was kind of how...
I didn't even know. I didn't even know if I was going to be a massage therapist. It was just, sure, I'll do the 200-hour program. In California, you can do 200 hours and get a little certificate that allows you to go start working, actually. And I thought, oh, what the hell? That a lot of massage therapists are sold the myth of, well, you go to school and then you'll get a job and you'll make like 60 to 80 an hour. Doesn't that sound great? Well, not at any of the real companies that do everything for you and you just show up and pay. You get pretty crap pay. And then to go out and create your own personal practices takes a lot of work, and you have to have knowledge, and it takes a lot of trust and networking and feedback. And so I ended up in massage envy, and I call that was my paid internship. So as much as they were using me, I felt like I was using them. And I stayed in school during that time frame. So I had my 200 hours, got the little business certificate, got this weird local Santa Barbara picture, and I look like an absolute rapist on that picture. It's so bad. I recently was looking for some passports and other documents recently, and I came back across it and I was just like, whoa, who is that guy? But it was a really amazing time because got people on a schedule that will like to see me, and then they're just like, well, what are you studying now? And I'm like, oh, I'm taking Tuinage, the ancient form of Chinese massage. It's amazing. You want to try it out? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And so while other people graduated with more hours and before me, I was already getting experience and pay while I was in school. And it was a really nice blessing in disguise. And then I just didn't stop. I got out of there and got into orthopedic massage. I just got dropped, 2 feet right into the deep end of the pool, and really felt a lacking of knowledge. And grateful for Colin Silverman, who's the founder and owner of Deep Tissue Massage Center Santa Barbara. He just kind of gave me books, and I was just this sponge of like, oh. And again, more in its structural, being an architect, trained on one, not a functional one, not a functional architect in society, but structure was so easy for me. And I really didn't get functional anatomy until neurokinetic therapy. That was what really helped me start understanding functional anatomy and movement. And then Gary Ward's Anatomy and Motion, putting it into gravity, putting it onto Earth. That was a huge game changer, and just, oh, duh, yeah, like that's not, inversion. We don't do that with our foot really ever. But when it's connected to the Earth, now when we're talking 9.8 meters per second squared, now we're on something. Now we're looking at something. So all of it was really unexpected, to be honest. To say that I was to have been able to travel around the world, to help teach other courses, to teach my own, to meet all these people, to connect. I still feel like the people I love the most are nowhere near me. And really, that time frame and that journey of meeting these people is so amazing, so wonderful. Really filled my heart, filled my cup up.
And that's what you need, a serendipitous journey through life that kind of fills you up from within. Oh, I love that. Okay, so last question I ask everybody. What does mindful wellness mean to you?
Oh, geez. Well, as I just did, pausing and taking a breath. I have.
That's like the most profound statement ever.
I'm grateful I did it just then and there. I don't always do that, and I definitely am human and have my reactions. But I have a dear friend that I haven't seen in a while. I used to share an office with. He was my teacher and ended up becoming a colleague, and and student in one of those beautiful relationships where we could be fluid between teacher and student. And I really appreciate that. His name's Eric Hudson. Love him. And one thing I will always remember about him is almost every time I'd ask him a question about something, anything, could be personal life, could be talking about body work or what's going on in the world, but he will pause and take a breath. It was always so distinct. I just remember kind of chuckling about it and just being like, okay. I asked a question about 5-6 seconds ago, and there we go. There's his response. And I appreciate it so much. And I think if we were to pause and take a breath, it would change the world.
I
really would change the world.
I agree with that statement for sure. So thank you so much for joining me today and for your amazing input. So if people wanted to get in touch with you or find you after this session, like not in real life in stalker mode, but on social media, on the internet maybe, how can they do that?
Adaptable Polarity social media right now only on Instagram and Facebook, considering other platforms, but 2-year-old child's way more fun chasing around than doing all that. So right now, Instagram, Adaptable Polarity. The webpage is adaptablepolarity.com. So email or either of the social media platforms will get through to me. And look forward to hearing from anyone. Say hi.
Okay. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Really an honor to be here.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Simply Mindful Wellness podcast. Join us next time for a new episode.